no matter what age you are, there's still healing. There can still be a different life. Our start doesn't have to be our finish. And sometimes we just think the older we get, it's too late. Time has passed. My kids are grown. And, what's the point? And the point is that we matter. We have value. And for a lot of us, that's really never been spoken into us.
Thanks for listening, and if you like what you hear, please leave me a 5-star review. Share this podcast with others and make sure you hit the subscribe button. Come on over to Facebook too. We have a great Juggling the Chaos of Recovery podcast tribe group, and we'd love to welcome you there. Now, do you have a story to share or know someone that does? Please connect with me. You'll find the link in the show notes, and I'd love to hear from you, hear your story, and feature you on one of the upcoming podcast episodes. And perhaps you are ready to find your way back to you. You'd like to reclaim your health in your life. Send me an email, connect with me, simply moira@gorskywellness.com, or jump over to Instagram and connect with me there as Green Gorski, or you can also find me on Facebook. I'll connect with you and just show you some simple steps and show you a way to reclaim your life and your health today. Thanks for listening. Until next time. Well, welcome to another episode of the podcast. I'm your host, Moira Gorski, and I'm so thrilled you are coming back to listen. And I'm so thrilled that you're sharing. We've been getting some great feedback on the podcast, and that really touches my heart because I just love to continue to share different people's stories, my story, as we can juggle this chaos of life and recovery and find ways to really step into our best lives. And a couple of, I think it was a few months ago, we're all still in this pandemic, COVID, weird time. And so we're on Zoom a lot. And I was on a networking Zoom with a group that I'm a part of. And I heard someone introduce themselves, Denise, who I'm not sure exactly what she said, but something about, helping people with their childhood wounds and, again, live free of shame and things like that. And I was like, wow, I need to connect with Denise. And so I did. And I started to learn about Denise and her ministry of helping others called Renovating U. And as I've learned more about that and about Denise, I just knew that I wanted to have her on the podcast today. Now, she does not work by herself. She works with a friend of hers, Beth, and Beth's daughter. So Beth and Denise are joining us today. So Denise Recker and Beth Jacobus, thank you for joining me today from Indiana on Zoom here. And again, with your ministry, Renovating U. So welcome today as we get started.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having us. We're excited.
Yeah, absolutely. I was thrilled to be a guest on your podcast, so I'm certainly honored to have you here with me today. Again, I love the name, Renovating U. I feel like as I'm a woman of 57, I continue to learn and renovate myself and renovate my life. And so I love that. So I'd love for you to share just how you came to start this ministry that you have and kind of what your mission is, and just tell us a little bit about how this came about.
Well, thanks again for having us. We appreciate it. We both have colds, but we are pressing through here. So
I appreciate that.
Right now, but hopefully it won't come across that way on the airwaves here. Actually, I came upon a ministry that I ended up being certified in called Life Skills International in 2011. And I came upon it because at the time I had a 17-year-old son who is now 26, who just seemed to be stuck in just not being able to move forward, very introverted, and just trying to figure out what was going on. We had just talked with counselors and they're like, no, he's fine. And I'm like, no, there's something that just isn't right. And so long story short, I found this program, went out to Colorado. We spent a week there on his spring break of his junior year of high school, which was brave of him to even say, yes, I'm going home at, 17-year-old boy. But I was only into it the first day and figured out, yes, my son needs some assistance, but I do too. And maybe I'm even the reason why he needs some assistance. So that was very for me. And it was like, is there a program out here like this? At the time there was. I said, if not, we're going to start it. So I did that for several years, went through the program myself twice. It's a very long program, and ended up being certified as what they call a facilitator, where I would lead groups. And he passed away a few years ago. And so that ministry has kind of shifted a little bit.
Not your son, but...
No, not my son. Oh, sorry. Oh, yeah, so sorry.
Yeah.
Yes, no, not my son. Dr. Paul Hegstrom was the founder of the ministry. And from that point, I was like, you know what? I knew the ministry inside of me was supposed to continue, just didn't know what that would look like. I was impressed to come to a church. I drove by it every day on the way to work. And I'm like, it was like, the Lord was like saying, this is where it needs to go. And I'm like, well, I don't know. It took me a whole year to actually say, okay to that. And then came for about a year. It's Livingstone's Church in Crown Point, Indiana. Came for about a year and just sat and didn't get involved in anything. And I'm like, let's just see if this is a place where this needs to be, where I feel comfortable, versus just normally jumping into something like I normally do. I didn't. And then came upon Beth. And why don't you take it from there?
No, I was swallowing. Our stories, of course, are different, which is the beauty of being in as a team. And of course, my daughter Bethany is not here today, attending young children this morning. So my stories, of course, is different. Grew up in the church. I think we shared some similarities when you were on our podcast. So a pastor's kid. And while I didn't have the wounds from the pastor and his wife, my dad and my mom, there was a lot of wounds from without, you know what I'm saying? They weren't from my family. I didn't feel like, as I began doing my own healing, I realized that there was a lot of judgments and things that I kind of took part in my own process of, judging people for the way that they respected or disrespected, or, because as a pastor's kid, you do see a lot of things. Pastor's kids out there, but always been involved in ministry and leading women's ministry groups. We have encounters that happen 3 times a year. At that time, now they're twice. Now, of course, COVID a little different. And so we began, I kept seeing a pattern. And again, not just a pattern in women's lives, because I'm a woman, so naturally, the mirror's in my face. But I was seeing that people were coming up and having great breakthrough and having great healing. But the long-term care of that healing seemed to be not there. Not that the church or there's no fault there. It's just there wasn't anything that was sustaining it. And so I realized it was more than just, let's go to a weekend and get healed. You know what I mean? Get help. That there needed to be some sustainability. And of course, I know you're in the health care, industry, broadly
wellness.
based, wellness more or less. And so I know you understand that. I know your listeners do as well. So that's kind of where I have come from. And I began to see in my own life, my thought pattern wasn't as healthy. And the thoughts with which I thought about myself, while I wouldn't express them, I realized they were playing out in my family and my marriage with my kids even. So it began my kind of trajectory. Then I met Denise at church, and we went out for just I call it a benign taco dinner or whatever, but it was like 40 hours later. I think they had to close us down. And we realized we shared the same mission and the same passion for the healing of wounded souls. And so, here we are.
And so, thought about, how do we, what do we call it? Because I think a lot of us in life, especially the older you get, you really wish you could have a do-over. You could start over in life because you're looking at life through hindsight, all the different choices maybe you've made that you would have made differently. We think anyway, but if we were put back in there, we probably would make the same choices because that's where our skill set was. That's where our thinking process was. And so we came up with the name of Renovating U because we do get to renovate. Just like we renovate a house, we get to renovate ourselves. No matter what age you are, there's still healing. There can still be a different life. Our start doesn't have to be our finish. And sometimes we just think the older we get, it's too late. Time has passed. My kids are grown. And, what's the point? And the point is that we matter. We have value. And for a lot of us, that's really never been spoken into us.
Right. Yeah, I love that because even when we think about a house, sometimes people take it all the way down to the studs, right? And sometimes those are like in regards to healing and, that may be a whole week-long right, seminar in Colorado, or maybe you're just going to renovate the bathroom. And so it's just a counseling session or listening to a podcast. I mean, I just love that, kind of that visualization of it, that, we still have the shell of ourselves, right? The shell of our home and that foundation, that strong foundation or whatever that foundation is, we still have that, but there's space to make some changes on the inside that doesn't change that, again, foundation of us, but it can really help to renovate it and make it look better, appear better, just function better, all of those wonderful things. And, I want to mention when you talked about your son going to Colorado, I mean, I did the same thing, with a similar type of program called Pathways for Better Living. Same thing. My son was struggling. Somebody introduced me to the program. I said, I think he could use that. And so they said, well, why don't you come with? Because then you'll be speaking the same language. And as you go through the program, great. So same thing. Within the first day, I realized that this was helpful for me. And at that point, my son was not ready for it. And so he actually went home from the program. And interestingly enough, when he went home and I went back in the room, it just was this epiphany, like, oh, I get it. This is for me. This is for me. And I'm so grateful for that because, again, I learned that I was living in a place of being a martyr, feeling like a victim, and being villainized by everyone in my life and that type of thing. But I really needed to step in to be a leader of my own, my own life.
I'll just speak into that a little bit, Moira, I was just thinking about this myself because I came upon a picture that, in fact, I showed Beth a couple of days ago, a picture of Alex and myself, that's my son. When we went there, we were on Pikes Peak, and there was a picture. We went to the Cave of the Winds, and he now, helps record our podcast. He's involved in the Renovating U ministry, and something I never even thought would happen. I just thought I want him to get, his healing of what he needs, but he's developed a passion for it. But one of the things I can say in that is I look back, and I think a lot of women maybe can resonate with this. I look back, and I would love to say that I would have gone to Colorado for myself. I don't know that I would have. What pushed me was my son. And so something that we have talked about in life and we've talked about in class is that we put more value on everyone else than we do ourselves. You would spend an amount of money, whatever it was, to help your child. But for yourself, you would say, well, it's not that big a deal. I'm okay without it. Things aren't that bad. And so I realized, as I started, really even just a couple years ago, looking back and reflecting, because now it's been almost next year, it'll be 10 years that I was there, and you're reflecting in things and it's like, you know what? I don't think I would have gone for me. I wouldn't have spent the money. I wouldn't have taken the time off of work. I just would have kept going because I really didn't value myself. I just thought, this is as good as it gets. And it could be a lot worse. We go to that scenario. It could always be worse. At least I don't have that or haven't experienced that. And that would have been a huge, huge disservice to me. But I valued other people more than I valued myself. And so, I don't know, Beth, how about you with that?
Well, I was listening to the story and, often, if you ask somebody that they'll share something that's, very hurtful but it wasn't that bad. I mean, I was only abused a couple times or, at least I had food on the table and they did put a roof on my head and behind closed doors, there was a lot of emotional abuse or verbal, or maybe just being ignored, maybe being a fourth child or a first child and you weren't the sex they wanted or the type of child. And so, your parents had, considered you like a chair, and so sometimes when women, tell their story and they're like, but you know what, I had this and they did give me this and they did provide this. And they're not quick to say, I didn't have this. And, the question that, I love to ask is, well, you have a daughter, right? I do, or a son. Okay. If they came to you with some hurts and said, I have felt this way or that way, or this happened at school, would you dismiss those hurts? Or if they had been, maybe sexually assaulted or verbally at school, would you say, you know what, it's not that bad. There was a boy in the other school that this happened to. Of course not. Most parents would would jump in to rescue. But yet often in our own selves, we say, it's not that bad. It's not that bad. And you mentioned about being, vilified and such. And I think a lot of that starts then to begin, it's just, as we grow up, it's just kind of me, and maybe something's wrong with me. We don't get back to that foundational roots. And I love that both of you guys were kind of tricked by the Lord a little bit and that you came for someone else. Yeah. And when you got there, you realized, oh, hey, I guess there might be some things here. That's all of us.
I really am so grateful for that.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
You have, you also have a part that if our story has been that, and we're not used to looking at things, and our child comes to us, many times we won't have the reaction that Beth is talking about. It depends. The pendulum swings. The pendulum swings to where, let's just say this, because we go deep, and from being on our podcast.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Like, oh, you guys got some deep questions. I'm like, the pain is deep, sister. The pain is.
Yeah.
But if you think about it this way, if we'll go to, especially for a woman, like if a woman was sexually molested in her childhood, and their daughter comes to them and says that, many times it will be dismissed, it will be downplayed, questions will be asked, how many times did it happen? Like that matters. One is too many. One can set me on a life and even on a lifestyle, opening up all types of things as a young girl. But because we can't enter into their pain, because that means then I got to enter into my pain.
Right.
And so there's also that part sometimes where we don't know what to do with it. It's just like put in front of us, and now I don't know how to handle it, because then I got to open up all my pain. That's right. So then our kids can get wounded that way too. I don't want to look that maybe this is going to cause me to look into my life too. And so sometimes we just dismiss, or downplay, which then causes even more issues within our kids. So, and
then it's passed on as well. And that's
passed on.
I think, or a lot of women will stop in their tracks because, wherever we land on the, I don't want to look at it, or the, where you ladies were, oh, I better look at it. And myself too. I just said, you guys shared your stories very similar in that. But I think at the end of the day, we come to, if I don't get off this crazy train, when we have to get hungry, the desperate do get healed and helped. When you say, hey, I'm sticking in here, and maybe your son left more, but there was a part of you that said, hey, I need this. He's not ready, right? That's correct. But you were. And so that door was open. But I think to say, you know what, I look at my kids or grandkids and go, do I want to repeat the cycle? Because if we don't address it, if it's not uncovered in the lights, right? If it's hidden in the darkness, guess what? Here's the baton, the next generation, it's yours. And we don't say that, but through our words and through our actions and our behaviors, we have just handed the proverbial baton to the next generation. Yeah. It may play out differently based on temperaments and personalities, but that pattern of behaving and doing or not doing continues. Yeah. And,
right. There's no doubt. And one big realization that I had in that course was that I don't ask for help. And because, and I believe I shared this on your podcast, is just that idea that, when you ask for help, it's like a chaos, and it's, I'm not capable. And so I'm just desperate and I have to reach out for help. And now granted, there are times that you feel that way and that it's like that, but I've learned that help is like support. And so asking for just, case in point, my girlfriend called me yesterday and said, and she works with me in the business, but she said, this is not a business call. I just need to talk to you. Like, I'm not feeling right. And we talked for an hour, and that's support. She reached out for help, but that wasn't like, oh, I'm, jumping off the cliff. I just need a little bit of help, and it's okay. Right. But I just felt like, I was raised by a very wonderful stoic woman who just did so much for us. And she showed us that how to be strong, yet she also didn't show us, she didn't open up and show us that, because when you ask for help, you have to be, it causes you to be vulnerable and perhaps show a little bit of yourself that you don't want to show. And my mom didn't really, again, model that to me. And so that's what I just continued to do. But I realized that that it's okay to ask for help. It's okay to ask for support. And it's what we should be doing. And in addition to that, as you talked about looking at yourself, I mean, that's hard work, right? When you open things up and you start to look at your wounds, that's really hard work. And I speak from experience and continue to work on that. It's hard work and it's really scary. And I think so many women, they just don't want to go there.
Yeah.
And yet, if our children can help us look at that and go there, then that's a blessing, right? For us as well as for them.
Yeah. I think a lot of times too, what you were just saying, Moira, is that, many times we kind of look at it like a backpack that we wear every day that's got boulders in it from our past, boulders in it. And we have learned to survive carrying the boulders on our back. But we weren't meant to just survive in this life. We're meant to thrive. And how many people could run a race of life with 30, 40, 50 pounds of boulders on their back and be able to do all they're meant to do, all they're called to do, all they were born to do? It's not possible. So one of the things that we talk about, in the classes and the ministry that we do is that it is a choice. It is a choice because now we're adults. We're not kids that were taken down a path that we had no say in. People took us, as we call it, the crazy train. Wherever our parents took us, we had to go. Here's your ticket, get on. You know what I mean? That's kind of how it was, whether it's moving multiple times, multiple marriages, homeless, not homeless, changing jobs, we're moving, whatever it is, we take our kids with us. And when you're looking at this, is that how we think inside, it all starts with our thoughts. And our thoughts are our perception of what our reality is because of our story. So we had events in our life that we believe the event is what changed everything. What changed everything is our view of the event. Yeah. And what we took in that. Now, what is our story? What are we repeating to ourselves? What are we living out as a result of it? So even if we know that, we still have a choice. But I think one of the things that we begin to get through to people when we spend some time with them is that whether or not you choose to address it, it's still there. You're still operating out of it. It's just you don't even know that there's a different life because you've made peace with it. So when you make peace with something that has happened to you, or this is just how my family is, this is how my marriage is, this is how my relationship with my kids are, even as adults, it's just how we do it. I mean, that's just our family. That's just how it's always been. We don't talk about those things. Until we can give ourselves permission to start asking the questions, we're going to be stuck. We're just going to be stuck, with a wound that maybe have happened 50 years ago that still feels as fresh as it was yesterday, because when someone pushes on it, all these feelings come up in us and we react to, we call it being triggered. And we're like, it's usually over the top. And it's like, why am I reacting this way? It didn't warrant what someone just said or just someone did, because it's all the years of stuffing it in your backpack.
Protecting.
Yeah, protecting yourself, So whether or not someone chooses to deal with it, it's a misnomer to think that if I don't deal with it, it's not affecting me. It is. Yeah. It's so affecting you.
Yeah, it's the law of gravity. I can say, oh, no way. If I jump off that, I'm going to land and, or I'm going to be able to fly. It's like, okay, we'll go try it, But sometimes we do become very numb to it, and we've learned to insulate, if something was done, which I'm sure all of us in our childhood had things, whether they were spoken to us or behind our backs, that it came to us that wounded the very part of us, or, you'll never be, or you can't do, or our family doesn't. Those types of things, those are pretty strong, words to speak to a child, even if it's not like a big T trauma, like where you've been, left, on your own or abandoned. But I think then, we don't address those things. It's no big, it's just not that big of a deal, right? Like you were raised by a very stoic mom. And, again, mom probably did, if you were to peel back that onion. Mom did the best she could. And I know you've peeled back that onion, you know, and Mom was just responding how she knew how, and how she knew how to lead and to guide her family for whatever situation you guys were going through. And so I think, you know, as women, we see things happening and sometimes we don't know, right? Like, I mean, if you don't know a better way, you don't know a better way. And then as the Holy Spirit begins to maybe open things up, or something is said and like Denise said, it triggers. You know, I had a beautiful young woman said, one time her husband, she said she let him take the bill. She was working full time, and he said, oh, I'll take care of it. I mean, that's what the man kind of does in life. And she said they had been gone. It wasn't electronically set up, and they had got a notice. She said, Beth, I hit the fan. I freaked out. She's like, I've been married 13 years, never been late on anything. He's the most responsible man. And then she's just looking at me. She said, I don't know, it must have just been an off day for me. I said, hold on here. There's something here. And over, hour and a half of coffee, we realized this had been a pattern in her life. She'd come from a single mom, and there had been 2 marriages. Both of the men came and took what they could from Mom, but drained finances. And she said, I can't tell you how many times we made do, and Mom tried to make an event around not having electricity, being cold, because she was from the Midwest. And so those are things that sometimes women, and probably men, would say, it was just an isolated event. I'm usually sweet to my husband. Correct. But to warrant that response of, what are you doing? How could you be so irresponsible? And of course, it brought a schism in their marriage, because he's like, what is going on? And then she said, well, I just had a hard day. So how many times do we just have a hard day?
Exactly.
There are things. But I said to her, you're a brave young woman to say, hold on, let's pull the curtain back here. Because I really went nuts over just a notice from, we use NIPSCO that said, you're late. But see, that brought back all the memories of being abandoned, not being loved, not being cared for, not being heard. And
what ifs, what's going to happen?
Yep.
What does this mean? It just takes you there.
Yeah.
Right. And that's, like you said, that's one incident, but like, how many times does that, I'm just, again, thinking, how many times do those kind of things happen? And you just, like you said, you brush it off, and then it happens again, and it happens again. And before you know it, this spouse is telling the other spouse, man, you're just always a nag, or you're always pissed off, or you're always this. And it's like, no, I'm not. It takes the courage to stop and take a look at that, like you said, and pull it back. And, this is a podcast where people are dealing with addictions. They've overcome addictions. And you mentioned the word numb. I believe that, everything that you're saying is so true. And when people deal with this, sometimes, or when they realize it, they just can't deal with it. And so they numb themselves out, right? With some type of, that's something that becomes an addiction. It may start out slow. I'm just going to have a drink tonight. I'm just going to, take this pill tonight. I'm just going to not eat tonight, or whatever the case is. And before you know it, it leads to, oh, that felt a little better because I can numb that pain. And again, that's why I love to share with my listeners, people like you who encourage people to, again, peel it back. And yes, those wounds are tough, and it's tough to look at. And when you don't have something that perhaps you've gotten used to that can numb yourself out of it, even if it's over-exercising or whatever the case is, when you don't have that crutch to hang on to, boy, it's really scary. But, it's a place where we can have people like you or myself guide them along, right? And say, it's going to be okay. Come, we'll sit next to you and we'll go through this with you and help you so that it's not so scary.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. And one of the things too, is that when you're going through this, to realize, and I think especially sometimes, because we're faith-based, I think sometimes we're taught, fix your behaviors, fix them, get rid of this issue, get rid of this problem, where we come at it from a different place. Everybody knows it's not a good thing. Whatever they're doing, whatever they're choosing to numb out, no one says, oh yeah, this is a great thing. They know it's not, right? We don't need to talk about that anymore. What we need to talk about is what we believe is, I already know all that. When people tell me that, I say, there's nothing you can tell me that's going to shock me, I'm not going to be able to sleep. Like, oh my gosh, it's like, I want to know what causes you to do this. Yeah. What inside of you causes you to do this? Because we don't heal from the outside in. We don't change our behaviors and then heal. When we begin healing and we're addressing what's really down, way underneath, all the shame, all the rejection, I'm not enough, I'm a bad person, I'm unlovable, so much rejection, so much shame. When that begins to be welcomed into a group or into a class, it's freeing, because it's like, oh, I thought I was the only one. For starters. People really walk through life thinking I'm the only one that struggles with this, because we've become professional actors in America, especially.
Oh, yes.
Whether it's on Instagram, Facebook, whatever social media platform, our workplace, people would sometimes think, is this the same person that's at home? We have learned to cover it up. We call it a pseudo self.
Right.
I've got to become something that I'm not. But when push comes to shove, who I really am comes forth.
Always will.
And it always will, because that's our foundation. That's what's really there. Mm-hmm. So when you're able to begin to say, this is not who I am, it's something that I'm doing. Mm-hmm. We have somebody that I follow a lot, is Joyce Meyer. And she's like, learning to separate your who from your do. Your behaviors are not who you are. But we think they define us, and that is who we are. Mm-hmm. And it's not who we are. It's our way of saying, this is how I began to survive and cope. What we believe, and what we believe that God wants as well, is like, we don't want you carrying this around your entire life. We don't want you to cope. We want you to thrive. And in order to thrive, we've got to start unloading that backpack. Mm-hmm. And then saying, what should have been there all along that I've been carrying for 30 years, it wasn't even mine to carry. Most of the time, when as a kid, the 5 wounds: rejection, physical abuse, emotional abuse, sexual abuse, and then incest, which is sexual abuse within the family or somebody that when those wounds happen to you, it alters your brain chemistry. We have a hard time moving in life. It has been such a divot that has happened in the brain. People don't realize that it isn't just willing yourself to do this. If we could will ourselves to do it, we wouldn't be having this podcast.
Right, exactly.
There would be no need for it if it was just try harder.
Yeah, and it's your business too. You would have no need to help people in wellness, because we have willpower.
Mm-hmm. Yes,
right.
And it is true. I was laughing the other day. I mean, rather than me talking some hyperbole, I'll just go there. Like the other day, I hadn't been on social media. I didn't wake up. I had some work to do. So you just could take a little lunch break, right? Little 10-minute, 30-minute. And I was like, oh, I got some messages here. Well, next thing I know, you're finding unicorns or something. I don't know what I was doing. But I was there.
Puppy videos,
Beagle. I go for the Beagle videos. And I'm sitting there. I'm like, what are you doing? Again, being on social media isn't wrong. Taking time to enjoy things or talk to a friend, not wrong. But I sat there, I literally laughed out loud, and I had the Christmas music on, because, I'm a 9 on the Enneagram. So the candle, the Christmas music, the Beagle puppies, all I needed was my comfy sweater, which is over there. And I'm just like, what are you doing? I laughed. There was no judgment in it. Before, it would have been like, oh, come on. You got to get going. Let's go. Next thing. And I sat there and I just stared at the candle. I'm like, I have a couple decisions I need to make. I don't feel like making them. Mm-hmm. I just want to numb out, and I caught myself giving myself permission. But the reality was I had to strip it back a little bit. What am I running from? Well, I had to make a decision that would have made a few people uncomfortable. Well, as a 9 on the Enneagram, I know you're familiar with it. And if your listeners are not, we love peace at all costs. Like peace is I lay that trump card down if I'm playing cards, and it's like, that's it. I won because my peace is here. But that can, like anything, excessively, that's not good, because sometimes conflict, and that's going to happen in a relationship. And then it pulled me back, and, and again, that brings back layers of childhood where, you want to keep things under wrap or whatever, because there's a lot of bigger problems in the world than yours, Beth, So once you start recognizing those things that are hard to recognize, and I could justify, Moira, I could justify my reasons for watching those beagle puppies, but at the end of the day, what am I avoiding? And that could be, for some of us, numbing out. For others of us, it's not one Oreo cookie, it's the flippin' sleeve, and it's the pint of ice cream. And I'm not minimizing. Some of us, it could be shopping addiction, or like you said, medicating, but in some way we're trying to, as you know, soothe that pain.
Signing up for extra shifts.
Anything, workaholic. Yeah, well, it is, but Denise, it is Christmas and my family needs it. And
extra money. That's what I'm going there for gifts. It's like, no, you don't want to be home. That's why you're not.
Yeah, and those are hard things to
they're hard things to look at, and sometimes we just never, again, we don't realize that, and we just don't want to look at that. I mean, and that's what that's what you talk about, like with childhood wounds, right? Because people are like, what is a childhood wound? Like, it's not necessarily a physical wound, although there could be, but it's really that emotional wound that happened in the past. And, I'll talk about this. I mean, Denise and I talked about this one of our last conversations, when I was just feeling just something in, again, my mother's still alive, and she was over and interacting with me, and the way that she was talking with me, she said something in the back while I was speaking with my daughter, and she said, I don't like the tone you're taking with her. And I was like, stay out of it, And I was so aggravated, and it brought up in me, there she goes again, judging me the way that I'm acting. And Denise, you helped me kind of look at that and say, well, what about, like, was your mother there for you when you were younger, or was this? And I said, that's so many times I've heard that type of reaction, if you will, or that I feel it as a judgment. But really all I want from my mother now and in the past was for her to see me.
Yes,
and to just say, you know what, it's got to be tough what you're dealing with, Moira, or it's got to be, or whatever. I just wanted to be seen. And Denise, you helped me, identify that was like a wound that I have there. And when my husband doesn't see me for whatever I'm going through, it brings that up, and I'm triggered there. And it's like, that just really helped me kind of, again, I wanted to share that so that other listeners could hear that and say, that's what a childhood wound is, right. That something happened today, and it's with my mother, and it many times in the past with my mother, but then it's also translated to
nowadays
my husband, or not being seen with my friends, or whatever the case is, right? There's the wounds from the past there.
And a lot of them, we talk about like small T traumas, which is what you had, and the big T traumas, which are the overt, perhaps there was sexual abuse. But in those 5 types of abuses Denise was talking about, the number one, you would think it would be incest or sexual. Oh, that would be the worst. But it's rejection, because rejection goes to the core of who Moira is, who Beth is, who Denise is. I can't help that I have fair skin and green eyes, I was raised German, or, I'm a German, like I can't change my DNA. And so when somebody rejects you, especially a mother, just for being you, think of where that goes to the core. I mean, if there was sexual molestation, horrible, but healing can come through, through a different way. That was something done to you because of someone's sickness, right? But this is done to you. You've been rejected for your personhood, and that goes to a very deep. And so a lot of people, if there's been rejection in the home or not being seen, then, oh, girlfriend, you'll see me show up, right? I've seen women that just swing from this little meek little mouse to boom, watch me roar. I'll do it all. Well, obviously both of those are not healthy, right? And so there's this pseudo personality that comes in. I was never seen as a child, but watch me do everything. Or I was never seen as a child, and I guess that's who I am. I just need to play back. So again, doesn't mean we all, well, if we're not seen, we look like this. There, we all come upon our voice at different ways. Some just say, well, I guess that's the way life is, and I guess that's just what we do as women. Others say, oh, no. I'm going to swing far this way, or left or right, whatever your pendulum is, and then go after, make my voice. And it becomes very caustic. And like you come in the room and you shoot everybody down because you've been silenced for 18 years. And so
right. Well, yeah. And again, if people have listened to the podcast, my story is, again, I felt, this happened many times growing up, and I was the third child of, with my parents, and all that was good, but I felt like I wasn't seen a lot. And I again, was very, raised in a very conservative home, and we just did what our parents said and followed along. And as I went to college, I just felt kind of out of control, and again, wasn't sure with some of the pressures that were happening. And when I think about it now, like not being seen for what I wanted, but I wasn't even sure what I wanted or how to make those choices. So that led to my eating disorder. And then as I started to heal from there and into my early 20s, and I was in nursing, and then I was in sales, I remember being like a red personality, like a driver. And, that's as much as that's part of me. Like, I'm pretty determined and driven. I kind of did, when you said pendulum, I was like, I kind of swung to that place in my 20s because I was trying to figure myself out and hey, I'm coming here and I'm confident now. Right. And then I've kind of, again, swung back and settling into a more authentic place. But it just makes so much. I hope it makes sense to listeners. It certainly is making more sense, the more that the work I do and talk about it.
Because what happens is that, as Beth was saying, we either pull back and we stay in victimhood. And I'm a firm believer that we're not victims. Some of us have been victimized. But the moment you say, I'm a victim, victims don't have choices. They don't have any power. They're helpless. And so many of us have identified with that because this happened early on in life, or because I'm in a marriage just like this, I'm a victim. No, you've been victimized, but you have a choice as to what you do with that. So either we just stay in being a victim, or we pendulum swing to being very performance driven. I will prove my worth. You say I'm not going to amount to anything early on in life, just watch me. But what happens is that the more we're performing, the more empty we're feeling, because we're expending all this energy really promoting the same feelings. On my own, I'm not enough. That's shame. I'm not enough. I don't matter. I don't measure up. I don't have what it takes. Versus saying, or I'm bad, versus saying I've done some bad things. I've made some poor choices. But whenever we say I'm this, we are actually embodying that. Our brain hears it. Our body takes that in. And that's what we're saying is, I am this. It's like, no, this happened to me, or I did that, but that's not who I am. Mm-hmm. And that's when you have to start asking those questions and being curious about that, because the curiosity gives you the freedom to say, maybe that's not who I thought I've been all these years. Maybe it's not. Maybe I don't know how to relate to my daughter, son in a gentle way, in a affirming way, because that was never taught to me. So as much as I say I'm not going to repeat who I was or what the parenting that happened to me, if you don't develop different skills, you will.
Yeah. And it's so true. And I know, Beth, you mentioned, just my wellness business. I think about that. And again, there's no shame in that, but sometimes, and I did a podcast interview with a good friend of mine last week who was a bulimic and started to fill her emptiness with food and fill it and then purge. And, just all of that comes with that type of eating disorder, which led her to finally discovering later on in her life, thankfully, again, how just the power of being still, was able to start to heal her, but there still was that emptiness. Mm-hmm. And I can't wait till I, post that podcast, but she realized that emptiness could only be filled by the love of God.
Absolutely.
And it just, and she said, I spend time with God every single day because that emptiness is not gone, right? Or it wasn't going away, but she knew she needed to fill it with something that was healing and affirming. And again, even people that don't have an eating disorder, if you will, or they're struggling with their health, again, they're just making bad choices. but again, a lot of times I've heard that, well, I overeat because I feel, I feel like I got, there's some emptiness there and I'm trying to fill it, or I don't eat it enough. And
yeah. And the best thing your listeners could do more if they're going through their day. And like I said, maybe it is numbing on social media. And now that maybe they've heard this, they're like, oh, or they've heard your testimonies, been like, so it's, in your mind, and you catch yourself doing a habit, a behavior, or if it's, the bulimic at that moment, and it's painful, but to say, what am I feeling? Right? I mean, sometimes there may need to be someone with you if you're going to start, emoting some of those deep places, but what's, just to stop for a minute. And you said the word still, I mean, that to most Americans, they got nervous if they were driving in the car listening. Like, did she just say still? Like, don't you know?
That's right.
On a mission, I cannot be still.
Happen in stillness.
Stillness. That's where people get a little nervous, because in stillness, if you mentioned your faith walk, when we take the Lord with us in this, and He's leading. I hear from the Lord when I go outside or when I'm by myself. God is very near and dear. It's not just when I'm going to have Bible study this morning. Most of the time I'm like, God, you're here, right? I know you're here because your word says. But when I'm driving in the car, just Beth, man, sometimes I have to get out my phone and start recording things. You're just talking into it because there's so much coming. But you have to get that stuff out first. And then that well that you can pour into with the truth. So yes, I'm eating or not eating because of this and this, but what's the truth about my day? What's the lie that I believe that has run 90% of my life, which is I'm not seen, I'm not heard, and I'm not valued.
Not enough.
I'm not enough. So I know from scripture, I know from other friends and family that love me that is so false. What is the truth about my identity? Let's, as Denise said, start taking those bricks off. Well, you know what? I am valued and loved because we're in a good relationship, and I do have friends that love me, and my son has gone through some great healing, and I have people around me. But if we don't take the stillness to look at our backpack and reach out to a friend, as your friend did, and say, Moira, this is not business. This is girlfriend to girlfriend. But that takes vulnerability, and that can be scary.
Right.
Because if you're not used to being seen and heard, why do I want to be vulnerable? Because I could be rejected.
Right.
Who wants to be rejected? It goes back to that childhood. So,
right. Yeah. And that, again, I think, as we kind of come to a, close here, we talk about the lie that becomes the law, right? Those are the childhood wounds. And, I like the fact that we talked about, like, why do we look in the past? Because so many people have said, I'm just going forward. I'm not going to look in the past. But you've been able to really show us that it's important to go there. Yeah. And it's hard work, and it isn't one day, one weekend. It's just a continual thing. It's important to look there because, again, we can then do some renovating and things like that so that we, again, can thrive in our life. I mean, as listeners are listening to this, like, are there, like, I don't know, just a couple things, like somebody's like, okay, I'm ready to do this. Now, maybe we'll leave your information in the show notes and they can reach out to you. But, like, what's a couple of things that somebody could do today if they just want to kind of start taking a look at things and free themselves from some of their pain? What are some things that they could do today?
I think one of the first things that comes to my mind is that we will not heal by ourselves because all we have is our story. We don't have any new life. We don't have any truth being spoken us. We don't have anyone saying, well, that's not true. That's not who you are. You're awesome. I've seen you in this. Are you kidding? You really believe that? If we don't have people who are on their healing journey, they're saying, you know what, I'm looking at mine too. Let's do this together. We don't have to pretend with each other. Finding a community is huge. That community could be one person. That community could actually be part of a community. I mean, we're gonna be starting a community, an online community where people who want to be on their healing journey can come. We can talk. We're gonna share. I always say you're not this freak. Yeah. We don't talk about ourselves because we feel like we are a freak. If people knew yada, 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 and what people don't understand is that everybody says, if people knew yada, 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 it just is a different, but it's the same thing. I don't measure up. I'm not enough. So I think one of the big things is really saying, I need a person that I can really just be myself with. And I'm not going to have judgment or shame brought on me or rejection, but it really is a safe person. And whoever you pick, I just want to put that out. We talked about in class the other night. It's so important who you pick, because if you're really on your journey wanting to say, I really want to start looking at this, and you pick someone, could be a spouse, could be, your mom or whatever. Well, mom should be able to, my spouse should be they may not be a safe place emotionally for you. It's so important to pick someone who is a safe person, that's not going to take what you've told them and turn it and twist it on you and use it in next conversations that you have, or make themselves feel better about themselves because they can use your story to make themselves feel better. Well, at least I don't do that. Or, you start this whole, where am I in all this? So that's the first thing I would say. Yeah,
no, I agree. Everything Denise said. This last class, we were talking about the components of healing, which are grace. You have people that, have grace for you, what I'm saying? That don't say, well, I can't, how long have you been dealing with this? My word. I mean, do you live in a box? Like,
when you move past this,
which will tell you, are they a safe person or not? You know what I'm saying? Like, I think you would know by their fruit if they're a safe person, but they can, they can speak love to you. I know Denise talked about the steps, but I think when you're talking about what would that look like? Because if you're a loner and if you were raised, like you said, by a very stoic woman that got the job done, most certainly she got the food on the table. How do you then begin to be vulnerable, And so there has to be the grace and there has to be truth, somebody that can speak the truth, but in love.
Yes.
That they can deliver the goods that you need, but in such a way that you're like, wow, I don't feel condemned. I don't feel shamed. I feel very seen right here. And just so your listeners know, it takes time. Like you said, one counseling session, one appointment with you, one appointment with whomever, you don't go, I'm better. I mean, if you know, or if our listeners have been through any sort of AA or any type of addiction thing, they say like 90 meetings in 90 days. What? Right. But you understand the thought behind that. It takes time. And then there's a continuation of that, whether it's that group or Celebrate Recovery, where you're not just done. You're in different parts of your healing. So just so your listeners know, because sometimes shame wants to enter in and go, well, you met with Moira, you met with Beth and Denise, and Bethany, I'm still there, sister, but you're up one on the run. There's still growth to go, but don't go, well, nothing happened. Yes, things happen. Like Denise talked about, our brains are beginning to change. The wiring is looking different, but we don't always see that right away. Just like a house is being renovated, it's like when it's done, it's beautiful. But some of those interior jobs, we don't see them,
Right. Right. And having somebody that you can, again, trust, that has gone before and that continues to, like one of my coaches said one time, I'm just here like with a hatchet, breaking things down in front of me. And I'm just a little farther ahead than you, but I'm putting my hand back to say, come with me. Come on, come with me. I'm just a little farther along and I keep doing the work myself. Right. And so we're going to be in this, together. I think that's really, really great advice and really wonderful. And I wanted to bring in, the 12-step programs too. You can get a sponsor and somebody that's been there before and continues to encourage you and challenge you and things like that. That's super, just again, because this is tough work, right? Yeah. And you need somebody to help you.
We have a couple of resources too that were very instrumental in our healing and just opening up things. There are 2 books. One is called Changes That Heal by Dr. Henry Cloud. Because I
have that book.
Oh,
I don't know if you told me about it or someone else, but I do have that.
That was one of my first books that I read that I thought, oh, you know what? It can be different. I just thought this was just the cards I got dealt, and this is just live it out your hand the best you can. Versus saying, no, I can have a whole new hand. I never even knew it. So Changes That Heal by Dr. Henry Cloud. And then there's a newer author. In fact, it's her first book that was released this year, I believe, but it's called Try Softer by Andy Kolber. And that's AundiKolber. Both Dr. Henry Cloud and Andy Kolber have very popular Instagram accounts. And he even does some online counseling. You can hear him counsel someone else online on his Instagram. He goes live. And so just some ways where you can say, I'm not necessarily ready to go talk to somebody. but I can read about this and I can get something. Maybe I can go listen to an Instagram or follow on Instagram or listen to a live counseling session with someone where I don't have to be the one that's actually sitting there. I'm not ready for that yet, but you can hear how other people are entering into it and that you're not alone. I think that's the most important thing. I think if we could leave one thing is that you're not alone in this world and you matter. You've mattered at your worst state and you'll matter at your best state, but it won't be any different in God's eyes. He loves you right where you are. He's not a performance God. He's a God who nurtures and loves and cares and forgives and draws you near. So if you're hearing condemning thoughts, that's not coming from God. That's coming from just the opposite. That's the enemy who's the accuser. God draws you to him. There's a safety in him. And that is so important, even in your moments when you wake up at night of saying, I feel so alone. I can't call anybody. You can call on him because he's sitting right next to you. So he's there. So, yeah.
Right. Yeah, that's just beautiful. I mean, that's where I'm going to end it because it's lovely. And again, a big reason why I started this podcast. And I know that your podcast is helping others too. Just knowing that you're not alone in this journey. Again, we don't always feel great about our life, but I love what you said. I mean, we are enough. It is okay. We have a Savior that never does leave us. I encourage, again, you listeners, to reach out to any of us who you feel like could help us. But even maybe it just starts by listening to a podcast or reading a book. I have gotten so much walking the dogs and sticking my earphones in and listening to a podcast or reading a book in my backyard. There's so much to be learned. And again, we're all here to say it's okay and you will be okay. And we're here to help and don't be afraid to reach out. I'm so, so grateful for this time that we spent together today, ladies. It's filled me as all my podcasts do. And I know that the listeners it has filled them too. So thank you for spending the time with me, Beth and Denise from Renovating U. Again, look in the show notes so that you can find a way to connect with these wonderful ladies. And again, thanks for coming back and listening. Make sure that you take care of you, ask for some help so that you can live and thrive in your life. Take care. Thanks for listening. If you like this podcast, head over to iTunes and leave me a 5-star review. Share it with others and make sure you hit the subscribe button so you don't miss a thing. I've got a tribe over on Facebook, so head over there and search for Juggling the Chaos of Recovery Podcast Tribe. And do you know somebody who has a story to share, a story of recovery and hope? Please let me know, as I'd love to feature them as a guest on one of these next upcoming podcasts. And perhaps you're looking for a community of like-minded, collaborative, and supportive people who cheer each other on as we strive to improve our lives. If that sounds like something you've been looking for, schedule some time with me. You'll find the links in the show notes. Let's talk, and let me help you find your way. And I'm here to tell you that you're worth it.